Well, welcome to this week's workshop, which is the principles of good design. If you haven't met me before, my name is Brittany Millington. I'm the brand strategist and designer and founder of BM Design. And what I do is I help businesses bring the mission to life by empowering a business owner and self-discovery and also building confidence in their brand and also making those decisions that they need to make in their brand confidently. Also educating business owners about the importance of consistent brand strategy and how they can actually help themselves in their business as well as much as possible. I am a 1909 member as well, and as a local entrepreneur foundation in West Palm, I'm also a Squarespace Circle member. I'm an expert at creating Squarespace sites. Another thing about me is I'm the oldest of 8 kids, so working with a lot of people I've had a lot of practice with, and I love cooking shows and HGTV. I'm always into seeing how things are made. So you are in the right place, right? You've been designing visuals for yourself, but you want them to look more attractive and on brand. Or you may be working with other designers and you want to understand how to communicate what you want in your designs better. How can you articulate exactly what you are looking for versus just taking whatever somebody designs for you that may not be on brand? How can you articulate what you want? Also, some of you may have invested in a brand identity system, getting a logo, colors, maybe fonts, getting all these different elements, but how are you supposed to use all those elements when you're on your own and you're creating your designs, promoting it? How can you actually be able to do that? Also, you may have current visuals that are not representing your brand very well and leaves customers confused. Maybe what you're putting out there doesn't represent the value of your offer, whether that's a service or a product. Well, what can you do? What tweaks can you do to make sure that it's representing your brand very well? And why should what you put out visually matter? Well, good design helps increase revenue. If people, it's the first thing people see, so it'll catch their eye, and then once it catches their eye, and if they like what they're seeing, they may take more interest to look into it more. Good design helps build trust, legitimacy, and speaks the quality of your brand. Again, what I spoke about before, when it comes to does it represent the value, the true value of what you're trying to put out there, especially if you have high-end services or goods. Does your design speak to that for what you're trying to charge? Good design also helps you look professional and not like an amateur as well. Good design helps your brand stand out in a good way, not in a bad way. And according to research by Adobe, 73% of businesses invest in their brand and design, meaning that a lot of businesses spend money, some type of money, into how their brand actually visually looks to their audience. So you want to make sure that you're using your money wisely, especially if you're getting business cards printed or brochures or what have you, or you're paying somebody to do some designs for you. You're investing money into your business, to the look of your business, and you want to make sure that whatever you're putting out is at least your best foot forward. And this quote I use a lot with my clients as well when it comes to trying to help them to understand something when they are designing for themselves, or they're working with other people to design for them. Good design is actually a lot harder to notice than poor design, in part because good design fits our needs so well that the design is invisible. When we look at the good and bad examples, this may sink in a bit more when it comes to how it should actually look. The design should look so invisible they can just take it in, versus noticing all the things that they see wrong or doesn't fit or make sense. Some of the design principles and elements we're going to be going over today will be space, balance, hierarchy, lines, shape, color, typography, and texture. And then how does that fit into branding? Something that we went over previously last week. Could you use all of these to create your visual branding? So let's hop into it. The first one is space. When it is used right, it lets the design breathe. Helps to avoid overcomplicated designs. It keeps the design clean. It brings attention to the elements that actually matter. Many of us are familiar with the Apple brand. And what they do very well in their branding is letting their product shine. They don't crowd it with a lot of text. They don't crowd it with a lot of graphics around it. They don't do any of that. They allow their product to be the main star within anything that they're actually advertising. So that's why I wanted to show you one of their ads that they had on their website. And also too, they have this on their different advertisements, whether through social media or it's in print in their stores, what have you. They usually just make sure that their product shines. Let's look at some good and bad examples. And these are extreme, just extreme, but both of these are car dealership websites. Many of us have businesses where we're not the only one in business for the service or products that we offer. So we are in competition with other businesses. Because of that, and because of the advertisements and the things that we see, we are already kind of trained on what looks good and what looks bad, right? And what happens when you look at something bad, well, you're not going to pay much attention to it. You're going to skip it and go on to something next. So with these two examples here, we have a good and bad example of spacing. Toyota, they have spacing as far as things are aligned, right? They're letting their RAV4 take the center stage. That's that top. That's what they want you to see. They have text in their website, but it's not in a way that's making you feel uncomfortable, where you can't take the information in. Everything is nice and even, it's pleasing to the eye. If you wanted to, you can scroll down because maybe you're not looking for the RAV4, maybe looking for something else, but it allows you to really take it in and not feel overwhelmed when you're actually looking at it. The bad example, and again, it's extreme, it's way too much happening. Even someone who may say, okay, they may have the cheapest car, it may scare somebody away when they're looking at it. Yes, they may have all the information that they may need on the page, but because everything is so crowded, it's too much for somebody to take in and they'll just run. Sometimes what happens when we're designing for ourselves and there's too much white space on the actual page where we're putting all information on, we may get scared and want to just cram everything in, try to fill every nook and cranny of that actual ad or print that we are creating. You want to avoid doing that, right? You want to avoid doing that because it can actually scare people away. The next thing that we're going to be looking at is balance. When it's used right, it allows the eyes to have see different elements as separate but cohesive. It communicates the message very well. And also the elements on the page have a weight to them. So when it is balanced very well, what somebody is seeing, it's appealing and it feels seamless. And there are a few different ways you can achieve balance. You can achieve it symmetrically, you can achieve it asymmetrically or radial. Those are the different balances that you can have. But it's important to note that balance does help the eyes to actually just take everything in versus feeling like you can't actually look at an actual design and pay attention to it and get the information that you need. Well, here are some good and bad examples for design when it comes to balance. The good example, even though it has some graphics down here, some text, but if you was to cut it down in half, it would be symmetrical weight wise. If you was to cut it this way vertically, it's still symmetrical weight wise, because even the text here is big and it's kind of heavy, which matches visually what's going on at the bottom. That helps you to take it in versus over here. It's more weight on this side versus it's more weight on the left side than it is on the right side. So when it comes to seeing it, it's like, okay, why is this like how am I supposed to be about the worst website designs? And what is this actually telling me? It's heavy on this side, but this here, you get computers, but is it really going to want you to pay attention to it? Well, it may or may not. So when you see things visually balanced, it's just more appealing to the eye, and it's something just to think about. Hierarchy. This is a principle, and when it's used right, it directs the viewer's eyes to where they should focus their attention. It gives a positive reading experience for the end user, and you should want to use the human's natural eye movement. The two movements that are usually the good examples of how people read, right, is really left to right, but think about the capital letter F or the capital letter Z when you're placing information into your design. Also, too, think about how you place elements in the screen that you are actually working with as well. What do you want them to see first, second, and third, and so forth, right? Because this is just an example, but you can see here they want you to pay attention to the middle first because they have it the biggest, it has the most contrast on the actual image here. Then it wants you to take in any information up here at the top, and then you can come here at the bottom. But if you think about it, it's like kind of in a Z motion, okay, as well. So you want to think about that. And when you're actually creating, whether it's on your website, your brochure, anything that you have created for your branding, you want to make sure that it's appealing to the eye and that they can take it in. These are examples as well for good and bad. On the right-hand side, it's a lot easier to take this information in. You know, because of how they place the information in this site, that this is the actual brand itself. So they want you to know that first and foremost. They have the information here for you when it comes to anything they want you to know in a short and sweet. Then they have the speakers that they're going to have at this particular conference that just allows you to take in everything step by step what they want you to see. Now, lumber liquidators, there we go. They're actually known as LL Flooring right now. They went through a whole complete brand change. But you can see why they probably went through a whole complete brand change, including the actual designs as well. This was doing way too much. Where are you supposed to look at first? Some had a hard time actually to seeing the value of this brand for what they were offering the flooring, and this wasn't cutting it. It's way too much happening for you to take in. Where do you want to look at first for their services, for their products? It was way too much. So this is an example of how, on the bad side, how not to place your elements in a way that they can't really take it in, especially when it seems very similar in size visually, that it's hard to take things in. The next elements that we're going to go over is line and shape. When you use a line and shape in your designs, it's used right when it transforms how design looks and feels in line with your brand, your vision, and your messaging. Also is applied correctly in design. And I'm going to go a little bit more into depth what I mean by that. Lines and shapes can evoke different feelings into what you're actually promoting and putting out there in your designs. Let's say for the direction that it's going. If it's going horizontal, it evokes calm and balance. If it's vertical, it evokes power and gravity. Diagonal, it evokes growth or decline. When it comes to the different weights that you use in your designs, it can evoke elegance if it's thin, or strength and boldness if it's a thick line. The flow, whether it's zag or curvy or it has an organic shape to it, that can evoke different feelings. And also when it comes to the style, how the lines vary, if it feels hand-drawn or if it's being implied, that can also as well evoke a particular type of feeling. And when you're designing for yourself, you may not understand this or know this, or may not be obvious, right? Because if you're using Canva, you may be using something they already have, which is fine, but you want to make sure that it's aligned with your actual brand. And if you know your brand very well and you know that you're trying to evoke strength and boldness, because that's what your brand is about, you want to avoid using thin lines because the designer has thin lines in it. You know, if you are trying to evoke some type of professionalism into your designs when it comes to the style, well, and it's not, you may want to avoid hand-drawn type of graphics or whatnot if it's not quite aligned and going to be representing your brand very, very well. You want to kind of be aware of the type of lines and shapes that you're using. So let's talk about the good and bad example here. When it comes to the good example, there's different types of lines and shapes in here, but it matches the brand. It's talking about a funky, light party, right? And it's not too busy. It has an implied lines and shapes in here. It's talking about being light, it's talking about parties, it's spoken fun. The shapes that they're using evokes that. It's not something that's too serious. And also too, you can see here that this white box here allows for the information to be on inside to be taken in, right? And there's a lot of, again, lines and shapes can be used together, right? And you can see that the lines and these squigglies and also in the circle and these starbursts here, they kind of have the same visual weight or the same lines as well. They're not like so strict. You can see the circles are kind of a little bit funky itself. It's not perfect, but this goes along with the brand. The bad example is Mama's Baking. It could have been better designed as far as what they were trying to evoke, but the actual overall design doesn't look that great. People may come to the wrong conclusion looking at this. You can kind of get what they're trying to say here. They're trying to be maybe simplistic with the design of this particular brand, but the line doesn't really go well with the actual look of this. So you want to be careful as far as how also too you put shapes together and lines and graphics and where you put them at, so that way it doesn't distract from what you're actually trying to say within your graphics that you're promoting. And we're going to spend some time on colors. When it comes to colors, because when you use it right, it does a lot for your brand, and it connects with your audience to act. It evokes desired emotions and feelings. It helps you stay on brand, and also understand the times or cultures when in application. And I could talk about on and on color theory, you know, when it comes to the different type of colors you use and why. But what I see a lot of times when brands are promoting themselves is that they don't stick with the same colors that they use for their brand. And that can distract from you standing out, because if you're not consistently using your brand colors, it can make it confusing to always recognize when you put something out for your brand that that's you. Colors can actually help to build brand recognition when you use them constantly. Also, another thing about color is that they evoke different feelings when it comes to a brand. You have, for example, blue, calm, trust, and intelligence. You may like the color pink, but does it represent that for your brand? We have to think about who our customers are, and we have to think about, again, how do we use these colors to make sure that we're actually representing our brand in a good way, and what's already in the system as far as how people think when they see certain things. There's a reason why brands like Chase use the color blue. Okay, there's a reason why organic businesses or lawn businesses, they may use the green color. There's a reason why high-end brands may use a black color in their branding. Having a little bit understanding of how colors actually work within your brand. Now let me make sure I change that to color. Understand how colors work in branding will be helpful because it evokes a sense of these different emotions when people see these colors and how they're being used. Okay. A lot of times, again, we may like to use certain colors because we like them, but we have to think about how does that evolve to our audience that we're trying to attract. Okay. Another thing that I want to talk about when it comes to color is how to properly use them. We have good and bad examples of contrast here when it comes to using color. We want to make sure that we are creating a good contrast through print and also through web as well, or on any digital graphic. Also too, something important that and many designers know, but not everybody know, is that we want to think about people who have different disabilities. They may have color blindness. So when you have different type of graphics where there's not a great contrast, it makes it hard for them to take the information in as well. So that's something to think about. So you definitely want to test out your brand colors and see if it has a good or bad contrast. You know, you can definitely always ask, you know, a friend or a family, or ask your audience, you know, do a poll and see if, hey, can you take this information in well? Can you read it well? Does it look good? Does it not look good? Trying to get some feedback so you can improve the contrast versus just trying to use all the colors of your brand at once too. Inside of design, you don't always have to do that. Some people want to because they feel they have to use everything inside their design when it comes to their brand, all the colors, all this, all that. If you know what you're doing, you may be able to pull it off, but if it doesn't work well, just go with good high contrast. So that way you can actually take the design in, so that your viewers can take the design in and actually take in the information that you want them to see versus them being distracted and saying, well, why does it look like this? I can't really see it. It's hard to read, etc. Some good and bad examples. This good example, and hopefully you're not hungry right now, makes you think of warm cookies. At least makes you think of warm cookies because of the colors that they're using. The tone of the colors are in the same family. It's not distracting, right? You can actually take it in, and because of that warmth, color, and the design, it makes me think of warm cookies. I hope it does for you as well. It makes you want to take more interest, like, oh, I may want to actually get some cookies, and makes you think about, things and whatnot. The bad example, maybe this designer or this brand, their colors are pink, blue, and green, and they are very, very high, bright colors. And they wanted to use it, but it's bad contrast. My advice, and I do this with brands that I work with, is when you're using high, bright colors, or it doesn't have a good contrast, break it up with white. Maybe use a couple of the colors, or maybe just one of the brand colors, and use that as an accent, but not like this, just for the sake of I have to use my brand colors in a big way to translate the information on the design. This is bad. It will let somebody say, I can't even read this. I don't even know what this is. This isn't for me. And it may be something they may have been interested in, but because of the way that it looks, it's hard to take it in. And so again, this is an extreme example, but this is an example of how bad contrast of using your brand colors can actually be a distraction and won't gain you any interest that you're actually trying to have for your business, especially if you're trying to promote your services or offer into it. Again, these are extreme bad example, but I just wanted to point out how, when you're trying to put information out there, anything that's going to communicate you're offering your services, don't let your brand colors be a bad example or representation of your brand because you want to use them in this way. Try not to use them in that way. Again, white always helps to break it up. Typography. When it's used right, it communicates who you are, communicates what you're about. Designers have awareness to when type needs to be adjusted. So if you're working with somebody, and you may see things like, okay, that doesn't look quite right. Well, as far as the spacing and whatnot, articulate to whoever's designing for you. They should know, but not everybody is a designer. So if you don't know, you definitely make sure that when you see something in your design needs to be adjusted, to make the adjustment. Also, use the right fonts for usability. Fonts can evoke emotion just like colors can evoke emotion, right? Thin line fonts can evoke a luxury or to a brand. Thick lines of a font can evoke impact or strength. So you want to be aware of the type of fonts that you're using in your brand. Also, you want to keep the fonts that you're using in any type of advertisement that you're creating to maybe no more than 2 to 3 font families. if you know what you're doing, you may get away with more, but that's usually somebody who's doing calligraphy. They like to mix the fonts up, and it's very, very purposeful, but that comes with time and practice. However, for you, and if you're designing for yourself, just using maybe a couple of font families will be helpful to keep your design simple and easy to read. You don't want to put a bunch of different fonts onto your actual campaign because it can be very distracting. Also, too, you want your fonts to be legible. This particular font here at the top of the screen in this graphic where it says the more affordable daily contact lens brand, right? This is fine for headlines. Okay, to read for headlines is short. It's not something that you will want to use for a paragraph text. Mainly because if somebody's reading a computer and they may be reading a lot of text, you don't want it to be in a scripted font or a more type of designy font when you have a bunch of paragraph of text, because it can be very wearing on the eye. You want to use mainly a plain text for the actual paragraph text that will have more words, sentences, paragraphs, and etc. So you want to keep it simple, and again, for usability. Headline fonts that are very decorative and whatnot, that's fine for short, simple sentences or statements. But for paragraph text, you want to use something that's very easy to read, not something that is very decorative. It's not going to get you more attention. Somebody may not even read it just because if the paragraph of text is very flamboyant, or it's very designing, or it's in cursive, it's going to be hard to read. And a lot of us are on our phones, our computers, taking the information. So that's something that you want to be mindful of. So when it comes to good and a bad example of using typography, even when it comes to the placement of typography as well, is something important to think about too. We have a good example. It is very simple, but simple is good as well. And you can see here that they also vary the actual height or weight of the fonts here as well. And then they have it placed here nicely. That's something you want to think about when you're having something created for yourself or you're designing for yourself, is to align your text a certain way so it can be taken in easily. And even if you're using just a particular font family and you don't have like maybe 3 or 5 of them, that's fine. You can always vary the one that you're using, whether you make it bold or italicized, or you make it small or bigger. Those are different ways that you can vary it, but still keep a cohesive sense of branding within your designs. And again, placement as well is important when you're using typography, when you are when you want people to take information in. And then you have here the bad example of using typography. You know, this is supposed to say, I believe, apprenticeships, but I guess they're trying to be clever, but that doesn't really what I see. I see app, rent, ice, ships. Doesn't make sense. So definitely you're using fonts and typography and how you place it. You definitely want to make sure that it actually makes sense and how you put the words together. Then also too, how things are just placed here, try to take up a lot of space sometimes. They're trying, but it doesn't communicate as well as the good design here. Again, less is more. The next thing we're going to go over is texture. And texture, when it's used right, is visually engaging, makes designs more memorable, and also designs doesn't feel so busy or overwhelmed. Some people like to use different type of textures, whether it is representing a fabric or plants or paper or what have you. Sometimes you want to use textures to give a vintage feel or older feel and whatnot. But sometimes it can be very busy if it's not used correctly in a design, and if it doesn't even match the design. If your branding has nothing to do with antiques and whatnot, then you don't want to have a texture in your brand that looks very old or looks very grainy, or things that if it doesn't really match. Also, too, you don't want to use textures in your brand that doesn't that's too busy and overwhelming, that it takes away from the actual the design for your services and offers as well. So we have some good and bad examples here. And textures, again, can be, what does the design, is it trying to evoke a sense of? And on the right side, we have very good examples. It has this marble effect, right? And it can look very luxury, high end, but you can see here that they use it in a very strategic way. So when it's done right, it looks good. You can see here they break it up by having some clean colors on the sides. They have the white here. It's not overpowering, but it does give a sense of what the brand represents in a way of like high-end and luxury. On this bad side, when it comes to example, we can see here that the texture is really the polka dots in the back, but is it really helping? Is it really saying something about the actual brand? Maybe or may not. Or maybe they thought it would look good, but you don't want to put something in to your design if it doesn't make sense, is what I want you to take away from it. If the actual design in the background or the texture that you try to put into your design is way too distracting, it's best not to use it at all, or to use very, very little of it if it doesn't make sense. So that's what I want you to take away from this particular point when it comes to using texture. So now we went over different type of elements for design, went over colors, balance, spacing, line. We went over typography, texture, and also lines and shapes and hierarchy, balance, those things we work that we just went over. Well, that all ties in when it comes to when you're branding yourself, especially visually. When it's used right, it brings the business, products, and services and story to life. It bonds the desired connection with the target audience. It creates a lasting impression, and also creates a consistent brand experience across multiple touch points. For example, we have Starbucks here. You can see here that these are two different design layouts for advertisement, but they belong to the same brand, which is Starbucks. So it doesn't mean that every design that you create for your brand has to be the exact same layout, exact same thing all the time. However, what needs to be consistent is the elements that you're using in your branding. As you can see here, you can see that both of these advertisements that Starbucks has the same fonts, the same colors, the same likeness. Keep that consistent in your own branding too. Also, they have great spacing, right? You can see here also too that they're making sure that what they want to be the star of the actual ad is front and center for you to see. So think about the placement. They're being consistent with their fonts as well and how they're using it. And again, the important things that they want you to see, like the 50% off, right? Then you can take in all the information, but they want you to know that this drink is going to be 50% off. Then it has get one free. So purposely they have 2 cups here. They want you to pay attention, and everything that's put here connects together. And we think about Starbucks and you think about what you see from them, it's very consistent across the different touch points, rather it's their TV advertisements, rather it's their commercials, or that is TV advertisement, but the promotions that they put out online, also within their actual stores as well. It creates a cohesive, consistent brand experience, which also helps build trust that that person knows when they go there, they're going to get the same exact thing. They know that it's not going to be something that, oh, this doesn't match what I saw online or on Instagram or wherever the case is, when they actually interact with the brand at different points. Here's some good and bad examples of branding. Earlier, I mentioned if you have a bunch of colors and if you know what you're doing, you may be able to use them together. But also, too, think about how the actual intensity of the color is here. And they want to have some type of elegance, so they use a simple font as well. This is good branding because of how well they're using the different elements together. And they understand how it plays well. They know that they can't do too much because the color is already so vibrant. It's doing a lot. So they keep the other elements that they may use with this brand very simple, and especially how they place it as well. The bad example we have here, when let's say you're laying out your brochure, or you have somebody laying out a brochure for you or an advertisement. But because of the placement of the woman, instead of it looks like it says something else instead of wear, and it's supposed to be Wear magazine, right? It's supposed to be about shades of wine, and it's like, okay, well, how is this actually evoking shades of wine? You kind of want to think about what you're putting actually in your actual advertisement that makes sense in the placement of it, your colors, where text is it going to read very well? Before you put something out, it's always great to actually have somebody else to look at it too, to help you to see if it's actually portraying a message that you want to portray. And also, again, can help when it comes to gaining the customers that you want, and for them to get the right information, conclusion about your brand.